going to go into some electronical factoids and uncover the terrifying reality behind left-handed controls with this Stratocaster. But first, let me dip you into the rich gelatinous broth of a Martin guitar for an appetizer. We're going to become technological Luddites and de-electrify this thing. Why ever would we do that? Well, because a man is going to pay me money to do it, and I can exchange said money for goods and services, like popsicles. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could do a before and after, and we'll find out once and for all what the inclusion of an undersaddle pickup will do to an acoustic guitar. And all you guys who blurt, "What's that going to do to the tone?" will be satiated. And we'll never have to ask that question ever again, because to do so would look foolish. You don't want to look foolish, do you? This is a D15M, M for mahogany, and it has an LR Baggs Anthem pickup in it, which is a well-regarded unit that I've installed in a good many guitars. People like them, or I should say they can tolerate the resultant sound. It's really tough to make a pickup that sounds like the unamplified version of the instrument that it's installed in. So much so that some major companies have stopped trying, and instead they use emulation software in their preamps. So your guitar signal goes in and it comes out as a digital sample of a 1939 D28, regardless of what it is you're playing. The next step will obviously be error canceling AI that will speed it up and get rid of any bum notes for you. That'll be just fine. The player doesn't use this pickup. He wants it gone. So what we're really talking about is unamplified tone, and how there's certain concessions that have to happen when we install a pickup in there. Because in the case of an Anthem, we have not only an undersaddle pickup, which is a strip of, well, you'll see it, but that also requires that the saddle itself is a slightly loose fit in the slot. I've mentioned this a number of times in recent weeks. So we're going to check and see how loose it is, and generally speaking, we know that a nice tight saddle sounds better than a loose one in the slot. And also, because this is pressing down on a bunch of filaments, there's a lot of sort of stuff between the excitation of the string and when it finally gets into the wood of the top. There's blockages. So we're just going to see what this sounds like as it is. Then I'm going to make a new saddle and we'll see how that sounds. Before we pull that out, let's check on the setup. Remember, this guitar is less than 4 years old at this point. And we have just under 6/64 on the bass side. And about 4.5 on the treble, which is pretty much Martin's factory setup. It can be a little bit lower on the treble sometimes, a little bit higher on the bass, but that's pretty much average. And the factory setup also stipulates very little relief in the neck, not a whole lot of bow. So I got my capo on the 1st fret, holding the 6th string down at the body joint, and checking around the 6th or 7th fret. And we have about 4/1000 of an inch, which is bang on. That's how they set it. So this is not moved at all since it was purchased, which is generally a good thing. And it's pretty comfortable for most people to play. Maintaining consistency. You've seen this before. I've got a little block with holes in it for the bridge pins to keep them in order. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes with custom fit pegs made from, I don't know, water buffalo horn or something, they've been individually fit very carefully. You can have a serious mismatch, and that would be tragic, so we keep them in order. Yeah, in general, we wouldn't keep the strings on after doing a bunch of repair work, but this is handy in some cases where you're doing things like setting up a 12 string where you have to intonate every piece, and you want to make sure that things are dialed in before you go ahead and restring the whole thing. So, little capo, loosely wrapped, not kinked, be careful with. Yeah, okay, so this cover piece is on backwards, which you see sometimes. There are people who have a hard time keeping these through a strap, and you want it to be as secure as possible. But there isn't a whole lot of room there. It's pretty narrow. And this is very, very loose. This is not good. You will get all kinds of weird reverberations and stuff from having a too loose tailpiece jack. It's got to be snugged up. Which isn't the easiest thing to do for your average person unless you have, the proper wrench or spanner and, the wherewithal to hold things in place while you tighten it. Well, at least it's a dreadnought. It's got a sound hole that's more than 4 inches in diameter. So, the land of deepest shade, unpierced by human thought. I'll pick that out of the way. Remember, there's going to be a washer on there. Oh, it's missing the spiked washer, which is why it was so loose. This happens a lot. People just throw that washer away. I don't know. It's included in the set. They put it on there, and if you don't have it, these things can tend to rotate slightly, and that will loosen the nut on the outside, and you end up with what we had here today. We shall turn our attention to the saddle, and this is loose, and it's not nearly as bad as some I've seen, where you can really, well, it's loose. Let's measure it. I can feel this actually has some wax on it. That's interesting. So this saddle is about 100 thousandths wide, which is just about 2.5 millimeters, and it is going into a saddle slot. Looks like about 106 thousandths. See that the saddle is sitting upon a woven metal, I'm not sure what we'll call it, overwrap, which houses the piezo or piezo crystals, from which an electric charge is derived. The LR bags under saddle strips are quite flexible and much less delicate. Fishman's can be easily broken when you're trying to push them back in the body. I've pulled the battery bag, and I'll cut a piece of this double stick tape with its backing and stick that together, so the next time someone wants to install it, all they've got to do is peel and stick. Very nice and easy for them. Now all that remains is the volume and tone control, which is adhered to a spot next to the sound hole. And this is some pretty good adhesive on the tape that they use. You got to be careful, especially if you've got something like a spruce or, heaven forbid, a cedar soundboard. That could do significant damage if you just ripped it out. So I'm slipping the edge of my palette knife between that and the soundboard and easing them away. Yeah, it comes free. Well, being ultra-traditionalist, this player also wants to get rid of the heel-based Strat button. He's just going to go with the wrap around the back of the headstock behind the nut. And I know what you're thinking, is this actually a time-traveling singing cowboy from 1937? And I didn't really want to ask him because, I mean, there's paradox issues and stuff. Like, if I find out, is that going to change things when he goes back to his own time? Look at that back. Isn't that pretty? So I cut myself a little plug, dabbed some glue around the hole, and shoved said plug into the hole, securing it firmly with the pressure of my index finger. One in the tail block will require a 1/2 inch plug. I happen to have this cherry dowel, which I sized to fit nicely. A quick check with the dial calipers tells me the undersaddle pickup is about 30 thousandths thick, which is just under 0.8 millimeters. That information will be important because the new saddle is going to have to be that much taller than the previous one to take up the extra space. I'm thicknessing a bone blank here down to about 106 thousandths to match the slot. Then sawing it to length. Then filing the ends into a semi-hemispherical profile. Checking the fit. It's still a little bit too snug. After removing just the barest amount of material, it fits in there nicely. It's snug enough that I can lift the guitar and yet pull it out using one hand. Using a radius sanding block to sand the 16-inch radius into the top of the saddle. Take some measurements and file Martin's characteristic intonation line into the top of the saddle, setting back the B string and the low E, and then I'll spend some time sanding and polishing. The glue has dried, so I can pare off the excess from the plug in the screw hole. Happy little touch of brown to disguise things. I'll use a flush cutting saw for the tail block plug. Cutting inwards from every side tends to make a cleaner cut. The area around the plug hole is of course slightly recessed because it used to have a washer that was imprinted into the surface when it was tightened down. So this is not always easy to get a perfectly flush thing. However, this whole area will mostly be covered up by the new strap button, and we'll have a strap in place over it for a good portion of its life. So I'm just cutting back with my tiny little Japanese chisel again, seeing if there's any overage. I'll apply some more brown. I'll flood the area with a couple of coats of thin super glue and let that cure. Scrapey with the razor blade. Some micro mesh to buff up the surface. This is a satin finish, so I can't go too high in terms of grit. And yeah, when the strap button's in place, that won't be obtrusive. Looks okay. I'll drill a pilot hole with a brad point bit. I need to gently ream the hole to fit the tapered end pin. This is something you want to sneak up on. If you go one turn too far, catastrophe. Not really. You can put a couple of stripes of super glue on the pin, let it cure, and that will snug it up. You know, it holds in there by friction. And again, I can lift the guitar by this. But in the event that I want to remove it, I can. Checking the action, and it is, as I expected it would be, just a tiny bit too tall. I left a little bit of extra, the thickness of a pencil line, so I could go back and have something to play with. The end pin looks at home, and now we can finally do the side-by-side test before and after. Okay, got it tuned up. I'm going to try and keep everything as consistent as possible. I'll use the same strings, and we'll see what goes on. The year is 1964, and you're a young James Marshall Hendricks. You've picked up a Stratocaster. You got to blow some minds. You have something to prove. So you say, "Careful of your ears, everybody. I'm just going to turn up the volume." But oh no, You've been thwarted. Because your guitar is upside down and backwards, spinning that knob is actually decreasing the sonic power that drops from your fingers. Somewhere in the background, little Richard is cackling. And this isn't a waking dream or a first-rate science fiction story from the annals of weird tales. Left-handed players face this nightmare each and every day. Why? Because there is no real standard for volume and tone control on left-handed guitars. Some of them employ the exact same potentiometers as you would find on the right-handed model. Some of them do use reverse pots that turn the other way, so it's a mirror image. And still others have the reverse pots installed, but they're wired in the same way that non-reverse pots are wired, which results in something truly unsatisfying. Let's talk about some scenarios. If we look at a standard potentiometer, or pot, there are 3 lugs to which we can attach wires or other components. This pot is what's known as an audio taper pot or logarithmic pot. Occasionally manufacturers will mark that. See, we have an A500, could be A250. Sometimes it's not marked though. But being audio taper, it means that it has an effect on the guitar signal that mimics or jibes well with the way our brains perceive or process changes in volume. In an audio taper pot, though, there is a directionality. If you look at it from the position of someone who's doing the soldering, or soldering, for volume control, the right-hand lug is always the one that's connected to the case. This provides ground. As we turn the control, more and more of the signal is shunted to ground and it changes the volume. The lug in the center is connected to the wiper inside, and that is usually connected to the hot lug of the jack. The left-hand lug is the one that receives signal from the pickups or the switch, depending on the wiring diagram. So it's pretty simple, but if we reverse this, in other words, connect the left-hand lug to the case and push signal through this side, the carefully formulated curve that was designed to shunt signal in a way that we perceive volume change is thrown out the window, and it begins to function almost like an on-off control, because everything happens in a very small rotation of the dial. It would be like 12 o'clock to 12:02. 12 is fully off and 12:02 is fully on. Next up, linear taper pots, also known as B pots. Occasionally you'll see B500 or B250. These are designed without the specialized curve to mimic the human noise perception. And most people, again, they understand that if you use them, you'll bunch up a whole lot of the effect in a fairly short portion of the knob's rotation. However, these don't have a directionality. You can wire them with the ground on either side. You might get a little bit more adjustability than the simple on-off effect on a miswired audio taper pot, but it's still not going to be a huge sweep. Finally, we have this. This is a left-handed audio taper pot. So it's designed to work well with your brain, but it functions completely counterclockwise, and it will give you more distance on the knob to play around with. It is a true left-handed version. In this case, you would always solder the left-handed lug to the case. After all that precious elucidation, we can figure out what's going on here. This is an American-made Stratocaster from the year 2000, and the owner is saying he's getting all of the function going on in a very short length of travel. So let's plug it in and see. The first thing, that jack is exceptionally loose. That could cause other issues. It's to volume. Turn it a very long way with nothing happening. In tone, that is as much. All of this does nothing. Fun for some wah effects. Other thing to notice is that it is functioning backwards. and get that jack all tightened up. This is always a fun moment when you first turn it over. See what you're dealing with. This turns in the opposite direction to which I'm used to. Okay, class, now we can take our book learning and put it to practical purpose in the real world. So what can we say about this pot? This is a CTS 250K pot, and it has been wired with the left-hand lug to the pot body. This means that we're pushing the current through it opposite to the way we would normally see in a right-handed guitar. It remains to be seen whether this is a left-handed or right-handed pot. I would assume that it's a right-handed one based on the short swing that we saw. The other ones as well. The thing about the CTS pots, CTS being the brand name, rather than saying left-handed, there is a code here which you have to decipher. It says EP4385L. Now that L could be left-handed. But in the case of all of these pots, where that code would be has been obscured with solder. So we can't read it directly off the pot. Who knows what it says? Actually, I don't think there is a code there, which would suggest that these are just standard pots. When unsoldering ground points from the back of a pot, it's important to use a soldering iron that is not too light duty. 40 watt, 60 watt, somewhere in that range. If you use a little tiny 15 watt iron, basically it takes so much time to get the heat into the solder and the surrounding metal of the pot that it basically spreads too far. You can end up heating things that you don't want to heat up. So fast targeted heat is probably the best way to go about these things. These still have the plastic from the pickguard wrap from 25 years ago. Wiring this up is not terribly difficult. It is a mirror image of the usual. It's good to have a diagram handy because it's confoundingly easy to mess up and revert to old habits. I can use most of the loom from the original installation. The wires are the correct length and everything. Keen-eyed observers will notice I've used the more classic position for the tone cap on the middle pot. It really doesn't make a difference whether it's on the end pot or the middle. Those two pots share it, and it's always in the circuit regardless, so this is just the way I always do it. Frets in the first position had some divots that benefited from some recrowning and a little bit of polishing. The bridge is floating at rather considerable height for someone who's not trying to be Joe Satriani. I'll adjust the tremolo or vibrato claw. A little more pressure will pull that back in line. Et voila, we have it. It's got a nice rock and roll action of 4/64ths, dialed in the intonation. Well, why did Fender use the wrong pot and wire it in such a way that it didn't really work? Your guess is as good as mine. The left-handed pots are a little more expensive and more difficult to source, but that shouldn't really be a problem for a company like Fender. And remember, this is a USA-made model, you know. It's possible the people tasked with wiring genuinely don't understand, but it ostensibly also made its way through the test process in QC. I don't know. What I do know is that if you're a righty and you've never tried to play an upside-down Strat, you owe it to yourself. It is the most non-ergonomic playing experience. The jack is right in your way, and the volume knob forces you to move your wrist into a position that's very different from standard. Jimmy overcame a lot to use this thing.